There is much to learn.
Okay, so first, welcome everyone. I'm Dan, and I'm a 3D artist for Beyond Skyrim Iliac Bay and Beyond Skyrim Roskria. I've also worked as a vehicle artist for a couple of indie studios, and in about 1 hour, we're gonna learn how to make some props. Props, not characters, not environments. Props, gotta love them. We'll model them, we're gonna UV unwrap them, and don't worry if you don't know what that is. We're gonna texture them, and we're gonna put them in the game, all live. Props are amazing. Characters are wearing them. Most of your most memorable quest rewards were props. You can do storytelling through props. They're just very versatile. And if people try to shame you because it's not as flashy as a character or something else, just remember, prop art is a perfectly valid school of 3D. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Said by a very famous 3D artist, scholar in Winterhold. Okay, now I have a couple of disclaimers. I didn't do any audio checks or video checks, so hopefully you can see my stream. Yeah. Couple of disclaimers. There are many ways we can do this. And I do mean many ways. There is no shortage of 3D software in the market. So, yeah, you will see people making them in Blender and then sending them to ZBrush to sculpt the finer details. Maybe UV unwrapping in Rhizome UV, then making the textures in Mari. Sending a... it's crazy. Yeah, it's a lot of things. So, I'm going to be using my workflow. And a couple of these programs may not be free, but when we reach a program that isn't free, I'm gonna give you a free alternative. Because you can do it. You don't have to spend money to get it done. I swear. The end goal is to get them all here inside Nifscope. And don't worry if you don't know what that is either. So yeah, with those disclaimers out of the way, let's get started. So, first thing we need, if we want to make a prop, we need some references. I like to use this little program called PureRef. It allows me to add a lot of images. It's free, by the way. We can move it with the right mouse button, and we can just right click. I have a little board here with some images that I've collected. Let's load it up. And yeah, that's going to be our Arcane table. So when looking for our references, well, in this case, we don't have concept art to go to base ourselves off. What I like to do is I like to mix and match lots of little details from different images. So for instance, I like the material on this. And better, can you guys hear me all right? Some people are saying that the volume's too loud. Hopefully you can hear me. Alrighty. Perfect. Well, I like to match some materials in this. I like the edgeware and the little lines, the cream and the darker tones. But I really dig this little seam here that we have on this one. And I really like the support on this specific table. So, as they say, ¿por qué no los dos? Why not both? Let's mix and match all of them and hijack those little details. If we want to keep this on top of everything, we just press Ctrl-Shift-A, or we can just probably go into a menu here. And no matter where I go now, this will be here. And let's jump into Blender. Now, this won't really be a 101 on Blender. Blender is a very complex software. I don't know what many of these things do. I've never entered this geometry nodes workspace tab, for instance. I have no clue. You don't have to know everything. You can get 80% done with just 20% of the tools. Do yourself a favor. When you start Blender, you'll probably have a light, a camera, and a cube. Delete the cube. Trust me, just delete the cube. Blender also comes with a few really cool add-ons which you can use to help you. And they are free. They come with Blender. You just have to enable them. So go into Edit, Preferences, and let's enable some of them. Really cool one. Import images as planes. So you can get references in Blender very easily. Another one that we'll use today, Node Wrangler. Ooh. By the way, if you, I'll open up for questions by the end. But if you guys have any questions, you can also write in the lecture hall. But as I was saying, Node Wrangler really cool. We're gonna use this today, so we can set up some textures really quickly to preview them. Another one that I like a lot is Extra Objects, which allows us to bring in some extra geometry into Blender very easily. So make sure they're all in here. And this one is a lifesaver. Loop tools. These all are all free. They're already in your Blender. You just have to get them in. So once you enable them, come in here, save preferences. Or if you have this auto save preferences enabled, then you don't have to worry. You just close it. Beautiful. Yeah, so cameras. You can hold your middle mouse button to rotate your camera in Blender. You can hold Shift middle mouse button to pan your view, and you can use your mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Now, there's absolutely nothing here. We deleted the cube as we should have, trust me. But I want to have a vanilla table from Skyrim, so I can kind of get my scale right. So to do that, I'm gonna get one real quick using Nifscope. Now, if you don't know Nifscope is a free software that we use to allow us to mod and get stuff into the game and out of the game as well. It needs some setup. You need to set it up, and I really recommend you to watch a video by Michael from Gamer Poets. He has an amazing 3.5-minute video. It will get you up and running in no time. And once you have it all set up, let's go to the let's go to File. Let's browse an archive, and I want to, let me see. I want to go to my Skyrim folder, data, and I'm gonna open up. Here you can see all of the vanilla BSAs. This has the meshes that the game uses. I want to open up meshes 0. And here we have a little browser that we can use. And I'm going to type in table. We can see all the tables or stuff that has table in it. And we can double click to get a little preview of what it is. And I'm looking for a common table. Here we can see clutter, common table, and I want to get a round one. So common table round. This is the closest I can get from Skyrim, I believe. And this is a really good tip for you. Get stuff that is really close to what you want to make. That will make your life so much easier in the long run. Because you can study it, you can see how the collision works, you can see how the file is organized here, you can see all the nodes that make this object, and you can see the lighting shader, what it does, you can inspect the textures. So really handy. Now I want to get this out of the game. I'm going to press File, Export as an OBJ. Just click OK. Let's select an appropriate place to put it. And I'm going to name this Common Table Round 01. Just save it there. Hopefully it went there. There you go. You're going to get an MTL file and a .obj file. Now, we really don't care about the MTL file. And back in Blender, we can press File, and let's import an OBJ. Wavefront OBJ, not the legacy one. And let's go to our appropriate place, double click it, and it's purple. Well, why? Well, in fact, the object is just super big. 100 times bigger than it should be. That's fine. And I see it purple because here on the right, I have some shading settings enabled. I'm in solid mode, and I have my color set to random. So every time I add a new mesh, it's a different color. That just helps me. You're probably in material by default. So I just change it to random. Doesn't really matter. That's personal preference. But this guy here, back face culling. Make sure you check this guy, because it's going to help you solve a lot of issues related to normals. And it's fine if you don't know what a normal is. We'll get to that. I like having some shadow and some cavity, but that's just me. Now, let's get this sorted, shall we? In Blender, when we do something, and matter of fact, in most 3D software as well, when you do something like a rotation, or when you scale something, or when you move it by pressing G, and speaking of which, I should probably turn this on. Where are you? Okay, now you can see what I'm pressing. Isn't that cool? When you do those things, you do it using a reference point. So the thing is, how do I change the reference point? For instance, let's say my reference point, my pivot point is right here, and when I rotate it, it doesn't rotate right. Well, you can press Shift S, cursor to selected, and the 3D cursor is going to be placed on what you have selected. The pivot point can be changed here. So for instance, I don't want to use my 3D cursor as a pivot point. I want to use, for instance, bounding box center. What does that do? Well, let's say I have my 3D cursor here, and you can place your 3D cursor by clicking this and press T to bring the menu out, first and foremost, and then you can click this little weird icon here, cursor, and you can just place it with left mouse click. Let's say my cursor is here, but now I can rotate it around its origin point. That's because my pivot point is set to bounding box center. So that's important, okay? We're going to use this a lot as we model things. Shift S, cursor to selected. My pivot point is my 3D cursor. Let's rotate this guy 90 degrees this way. So how do we do that? We press R to rotate. X, because I want to lock this to the X axis. Minus 90 on my numpad, and I'm going to press enter. There we go. That's one step of the way. And I want to scale this down 100 times. So I'm going to press S, 0.01, enter, and there we go. Now, how did I focus on this so quickly? Well, I just pressed the comma/delete on my numpad, and there you go. It's here. We can focus on objects. Very, very handy. Ooh, someone has a hot mic there. But anyway. All right, so we have our table. Table's here. We're going to use Blender units to model this. And I opened this side menu by pressing N, by the way. You can see the dimensions in non-freedom units, aka meters. And we're ready to go. So let's bring our references back in, and let's start modeling, shall we? I'm going to press Ctrl-Shift-A to make this always on top. And, oopsie. Okay, now it's always on top. And a couple of things. I don't like working in perspective. Right now we're using orthographic view, so you see everything is lined up. If I switch to perspective, it gets a little bit wonky and difficult to work with, so you can change between them by pressing 5 on your numpad. You can press 1 to go to the front view, and you can check that here on the top left, we're in front view. You can press 7 to go to the top view, and you can press 3 to go to the side view. If you press 9, you're going to go to the opposite side of what you're seeing. So if I go to the front and press 9, we're seeing the back. 7, 9. We're looking at the bottom, and so on and so forth. So, using these little shortcuts that we've learned, let's do something. Let's go to the top view, and I'm going to do something here a lot. I'm going to hold Z, and I'm going to slide my mouse to wireframe so we can see what we're doing. This is a wireframe view of the mesh. I can switch between solid, wireframe very quickly. And I'm gonna make something. How do I make something? I want to add something. So to add something, I'm gonna press Shift A, and I'm gonna add a mesh. Shift A to add a mesh. Let's add a cube. Dan, you just deleted the default cube. Why? Couldn't you have just used it? No, we don't use the default cube. Trust me. Gonna move it up a bit using GZ to lock it to the Z axis. Z in Blender is up. I don't know why some other software don't have it like that. And as you see, I try to scale it, but it's scaling it based on my 3D cursor. So I'm gonna press Shift S, cursor to selected. I'm gonna scale it down. I want something a little bit thicker than what Skyrim has, but not just too thicker. And I want to scale this outside, but I don't want it to increase in height. So if I try to scale this so it matches the width, the height gets a little, out of balance. So if I want to scale this in every other axis but one, all I have to do is press S to scale, Shift Z, so it scales in every other axis except the Z one, which is the vertical one. And we can do this. I think this is kind of too big. Want to reduce it a tad. There we go. And I'm going for a little base like this, a square base, but not as fancy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tab into edit mode. How do I do that? I'm in object mode, as you can see on the top left. I'm going to press tab and nothing happened. Why? Okay, now it's doing it. And I'm in edit mode. This is where you can manipulate each and every vertex, each and every edge of the object, each and every face. And I'm selecting through them by pressing 1 for the vertices, 2 for the edges, and 3 for the faces. If I click a face, shift click another face, I select multiple faces or vertices. If I go to edge selection, or pretty much any other selection, and I hold Alt and click, I didn't do anything. That's a bit underwhelming. But yeah, let's do it in face mode. If I hold Alt and click, I'm gonna select this entire loop. So that's very, very handy, okay? And with that knowledge, I'm gonna add a few more vertices here so we can work with. I'm going to press Control R, and you see this yellow line. This is where I'm going to add them. I'm going to add a few here. Let's do it again. I'm going to press Control R, scroll my mouse wheel so I can add more of them, and I'm going to place them here with left mouse button, and I'm going to press right mouse button so I don't move them around. I'm going to do the same for this side, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press C to make a circle selection. I'm going to select these middle points, right mouse button to cancel that, and Shift S cursor to select it. You know what? I don't quite like that selection. Let's click the object in object mode and then cursor to selection. Tab, and I want to scale these guys. But if I scale them, you see, oh, that's why I selected this bad boy by mistake. There we go. If I scale them, it's kind of sharp. It's like way too sharp. If I press O or click this little button up here, I can use proportional editing. And this allows me to influence the other vertices on a radius from the ones I have selected. I'm going to use a sphere. Yeah, let's use the sphere falloff, not fallout. And let's scale it down a bit. We can scroll the mouse wheel to select the radius that we're influencing. And I want to bring these guys a little bit closer to the center. But if I do that, you will see that our mesh gets really wonky. So let's try that again. But this time I'm going to press... Let me see if I'm selecting everything. I am. Let's press S, Shift Z, so they don't go up and down like crazy, and we keep the top and bottom flat. We have some weird little shading issues going on, so I'm gonna right-click my mesh, and I have this auto smooth here, but if you don't, just click Shade Smooth, and here click Auto Smooth on the bottom left, and you can change the angle. 30 or 60 work fine for most cases, and we have a little base, but this is super pointy, so I want this to be a little bit, flatter on the edges there. So I'm gonna select these guys, and I'm gonna get out of proportional editing, and I'm gonna bring them in just like that, scaling them down, let's take a look. Ooh, yeah, that didn't work, did it? Because we didn't press S Shift C to do it. And now this should look a little bit more like what we want it to look. Cool. Ooh, and we have a little... Is this a shadow? Yeah, it's a shadow. Okay. Now, I want to make this little support. I really like it. And I'm going to teach you, there are many ways you can do this, guys, by the way. You can model it, sculpt it, you can... I'm gonna teach you a way that we can make these sorts of shapes very quickly. If you ever tried pottery, you will feel right at home. So let's add a plane. Let's go into edit mode and let's delete 3 of these vertices. Let's keep 1. Instead of sending the cursor to my selection, I want to send the selection to my cursor. I am gonna look where this guy went. He went right here. I can, and I'm just messing with this one vertex. I'm gonna place him right about here. And I'm gonna add a modifier to this. Modifiers modify the mesh in a non-destructive way, which means we can always change them. They're very modular, and we have a ton of them. I have no idea what many of these do. It's completely fine. You don't have to know. I'm going to use a screw modifier. This will rotate our vertex in any axis we desire, in this case the z-axis by default. And I want to add a subdivision modifier to it by pressing Ctrl 1, or by coming in here and selecting a subdivision surface modifier. So we have 1 level of subdivision, and I'm going to place the subdivision modifier above the screw one. This is very important. The order of your modifiers will change the end result, so keep that in mind. What these two allow me to do is, if I select this guy and I press E to extrude it up, you will see it starts to make the shape of the object, but in its entire circumference. So I can just very quickly just extrude and make the shapes that I want. Let's see, I want this part to be a little thinner and then a bit thicker here. Then this little fatty part. And I can just play around with these. And very easily, I can get something to work with. When I'm making this little part here, now the image is a little bit low res, but it's just so we get the shapes. It's all about getting the shapes. And I'm gonna close this, and yeah. Now you will see this doesn't look quite correct. And the only reason we can see this is because we have backface culling on. So I'm going to teach you how to fix this in a minute. But as I said, the cool thing about using modifiers is I can very, very easily just drag these vertices around and change the shape very significantly without having to deal with the actual geometry involved. And that's a very powerful tool for you to work. You can iterate very quickly. You can try lots of different designs. Maybe I want this to be a little bit thinner. Yeah, I'm quite happy with this. So what I encourage you to do is make a copy of this while it's in this editable, very easy to work with form. I'm gonna press Shift D to make a copy of this. Right click to cancel the placement. And you can see all the stuff we have here at the top right. You can see the scene, you can see the Skyrim table, you can select things, you can hide things. And if you press F2, you can rename things. So I'm going to rename this support underscore NA for non-applied. And I'm going to hide it. So we have a backup, and we have this guy. And I'm going to rename this support. Yeah, just support. And I'm going to apply these modifiers. I will apply them in the order from top to bottom. This is very important as well. And now if I go into edit mode, you can see we have created the actual geometry for the object. And speaking of which, let's solve this issue, shall we? So this is a normal issue. The normals of the object are oriented in the wrong way. To fix that, just go into edit mode, select all the things, pressing A, and press Shift N. Voila, it's done. Okay. We have our support kind of modeled. And by the way, I know it doesn't look exactly like it. You have these grooves, but it's completely fine. We're going to deal with them in a bit. I'm just trying to get a block out of the entire thing so we can refine it later on. That's a very important thing. Start simple, and then you add details as you go. So I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to add a little cylinder. And cylinders are tricky because they take a lot of vertices, and we kind of want to optimize this thing. We don't want to have too many of them. But if we have two little cylinders, it looks super blocky. It looks like a PlayStation 1 game, but without the cool aesthetics. So the bigger the cylinder, the more vertices you need. For this guy, I'm gonna maybe go with 24 or even 32 and try to use multiples of 4, because you can then quickly dissolve edges and vertices if you need to, and it's not gonna cause you any issues. So let's go with 24. 24 is good, and I'm gonna shade this auto smooth. Just gonna scale this, move it where I want it to, and let's match this to our reference. Scale it down a little bit. And if I want to scale just the bottom part, I can tab into edit mode. I can select these guys by pressing B, and I can make a selection like this. Select them with B. And the reason I'm in wireframe, by the way, is if I try to do this in solid mode and I try selecting these guys, you will notice I just selected the ones that I can see. You still have all these folks here that are occluded. So the reason I like to do this in wireframe view is because when I do this, I get all of them. So let's maybe get this guy in here, and I can now go into face selection mode, select the bottom face, and I can inset this guy by pressing I to inset. And let me see, I want to bring it about here, maybe a little bit more, and I want to go to edge selection mode, and perhaps I'm going to do a little bevel. So to do a bevel, I'm going to press Control B to bevel. But I noticed something. This isn't beveling quite right, and the reason the bevels don't quite work is because, you'll see, if I try to bevel it like this, like the top one, you will see it looks really weird. The reason it does this is because we need to apply scale to the table, to the object. So I'm going to press Control A to apply my scale transformations, and I'm going to apply scale. And now, if I try to bevel it, you'll see it works like a charm, beveling just as I want it to. So let's select this bottom edge here. And by the way, if it's super confusing to see, just hide this guy. Press H to hide. If you don't want to hide, you can click the object you want to work with. Let me see if I can find him. And you can press the little button that is right. Now I don't know what this is going to be to you. To me, it's the button left of the right shift. And I can get it into local mode. I can isolate objects. You can see here on the top left, local mode. Allows me to work with them fairly easily. I can bevel this guy now, and it bevels nicely just as I want it to. I'm going to go to face selection mode, hold Alt, select the entire loop, and I'm going to extrude it downwards. Let's bring back our reference mesh so we can see what's going on. Yeah, just about that. And we kind of have the basis, the base of our model here. I'm going to hide this Skyrim table because I don't really need it anymore. And it's tempting to smoothen this out and make a really nice bevel. If you scroll your mouse wheel up, you're gonna add more segments to it. but this adds a lot of geometry. And if you want to see how much geometry you have, click on this little button here, the overlays, and is it text info? Where is it? It's probably somewhere in here. Well, it's one of these. One of these has got to be the information. Well, it could, yeah, statistics. Yeah, there we go. Statistics. Now you can see how many vertices you have, how many faces, edges, triangles. And triangles are very important. And if we add a lot of these, just look at the amount of triangles just rocketing up. So what I like to do is I add a single, one segment bevel to the parts I want to make smooth. And use this sparingly, by the way, and we're gonna turn this into a very nice bevel in a few minutes. Just trust me on that one. You can auto smooth, maybe set this to 60. There we go. So this cannot. I know it's an arcane table, but this can't be levitating like this. So I'm gonna add some support, some feet to this table. Let's see where I'm going to place them. Maybe I'm going to select this guy. Cursor to selected, just so I can have a pivot point. Shift A, and I'm going to add an icosphere. Let's scale this girl down, and let's bring it down here. Okay, now I'm going to make it just a tad bigger. Shade smooth, and I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I want to remove this little top part here. I'm going to press C. I'm going to press X to delete faces, and now we have this open icosphere. I'm going to hold Alt and click here with edge select to get this loop, and I'm going to extrude this up so I get a little support here. Now, there are many ways you can place these things around, but I'm going to show you a really quick and cool way to do it. Just, I'm going to do it around the base. So I'm going to use the base as my pivot point. I'm going to get into edit mode. I'm sorry. Before I do that, I need to change the origin point of this icosphere to use the same one as this guy. So to do that, I'm going to right click, set origin the 3D cursor, and now it's rotating and doing everything around this guy. It's the origin point, and origin points are really important for modifiers. Keep that in mind. I'm going to go to edit mode, select everything, and press Alt E to bring up the extrusion menu, but I'm going to select spin. And I can do an extrusion in the format of a spin, and I can change the steps to 4. And I can change the axis I'm using. And there we go. Gonna just select, click use duplicates. And there we have it. Done. But nothing stops you from just copying it using Shift D or, just doing it any other way. It's just the way I like to do it for these circular shapes like that. And we have the basis of we have the main shape of the table done. But, it's kind of lacking, kind of flat. So what we could do, and as I said, there are many ways you can do this. We can enhance this a little bit. So some folks would take this into a sculpting program like ZBrush and sculpt it a little bit, get the details going. But I just really want to get the macro details done, like the shapes down, right, and stuff like that. And I'm gonna teach you a really cool, cool little way to do these things for simple models like these. First, I'm gonna select everything. I'll probably put this in a collection, pressing M, new collection. I'm going to call this AU table underscore low, because this is it's a low poly of the table. Or is it? We're using around 2,000 triangles. Could be better. And the culprit is probably this dude. Just look at the amount of polygons we're using. So I'm gonna delete some of these. By pressing Alt and Shift and selecting these edge loops, I can select them. And I'm gonna select every other one of these. Let me do a test first. Okay, there we go. So I'm gonna select every other loop, and I know there's probably a super easy way to do this using a shortcut, but you don't have to remember all of them. I don't. And I'm gonna press Ctrl X to dissolve. And you will see that, yeah, we got rid of some geometry, but the silhouette remains preserved. And we got rid of about 600 triangles, which is quite substantial. But there's one thing, the base here. The base doesn't look good. This really shows up as a blocky thing, and I don't want to do it. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna manually get in here and tweak it. And you can also get rid of these loops if you want to, as long as you don't break your silhouette. So some optimization can be done, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna leave this. I'm gonna leave this one. And let's fix this guy back here, down here. So when we're working with 3D models, it's very wise for us to keep this to quads and triangles. What do I mean with that? You see this face here has 4 vertices, keeping that shape up. In fact, if I select all 4 of them, I select the entire face. And this is really useful because if I want to add an edge loop, the program understands what I'm trying to select. Everything works flawlessly. It's really easy to work with. It's very easy to rig when you're working with, say, armor or things that will deform. So we want to keep it really, we want to keep the topology optimized and easy to work with. Now I want to add a little vertex here, and if I press Ctrl R and do it this way, not only I added one here, but I also added this entire column here of vertices, and I don't want that. So I'm gonna press K to enter the knife tool, and it snaps to the vertices that I put my mouse, I float my mouse above. Just gonna select this, then I'm gonna select roughly the middle of this guy, and this allows me, if I press enter, to cut. Now I have a quad, I have a triangle, a triangle, a triangle, and I have one extra vertex here that I can use. So again, I'm sure there are many ways you can do this lightning fast, but I'm just gonna do it. Just gonna do it. In real life, you would have some music on while you do these things. So yeah, let's add this extra row of vertices here. And sometimes you do need to get under the hood, so to speak, and tweak and fix some details that you don't like on your mesh. And that's completely fine. There we go. Now, I'm going to select this entire row of vertices, and I'm just going to right click, and because we activated loop tools, I can just click circle, and it makes a circle out of them. Just like that. Maybe we can push it out a little bit. Just gonna push it out. There we go. And now we have a better silhouette. Cool. Now, I want to sculpt some little details in here. And to do that, I'm going to set up a multi-resolution modifier. You'll see what this does shortly. So I can just click subdivide, and the difference between this and a subdivision modifier is I can go back to different viewport levels, and not only that, but it's gonna store information, sculpting information, in each layer. What does that mean? Well, if I click on sculpting here, the sculpting workstation, is it workstation? I'm sorry, workspace. You go to the sculpting area. And you can do some really nice things. First, I want to change this to orthographic. because I don't want the distortions from perspective, I can select a lot of little brushes here. All of these do different things. If you hover your mouse above them, you'll see what they do. I'm gonna do a draw sharp. Use a draw sharp brush, and I can change the size of this using the brackets. And I want to do these little grooves. So if I do, if I just click and draw, I'm gonna remove material from it. And if I hold Control and click, I'm gonna add material to it. That works with pretty much all the brushes. The Control will invert whatever it is that you were doing. Now, I want to go into the Symmetry tab here, and I want to change the radial Z symmetry to around 16. That allows me, and by the way, the strength of the brush is set to default, 0.5. I'm going to increase this maybe a bit. And what this allows me to do is, if I come here to the stroke, and the stroke method, I change this to line. And the fall off, I'm going to keep the fall off in sharper. It's fine. If I click and drag, look what I do. Boom. Just like that. It just does it. So I can do some little, some very quick sculpting in here. I can do it this way by holding Control, and I can maybe do one like this, holding Control, and I can add these sculpted details. Maybe I'm going to increase the size for this guy. There we go. Some really quick sculpting. I'm going to go back to layout, and the thing here is, well, we can't really use this. This is way, you can see this, but yeah, it's showing up here. This is almost 500,000 triangles. This is gonna crash people's computer, okay? For a table. So we don't want that. What we will need to do is we're gonna use a trick here for that people use in games all the time. We're gonna bake these details that we did on this high poly version of this into the low poly that we did previously. So we keep the details, but on the simpler geometry. So more on that shortly. You could go crazy and sculpt all the wood details in here if you want to. I'm not going to do that. I just really want to get these macro ones done so we can go ahead and proceed. I'm kind of happy with this. But that doesn't mean my high poly has to be just this, because let me show you. If I select this guy and I clone him, I make a copy by pressing Shift D, and then I say add a subdivision modifier to it. Maybe it's 2 levels of subdivision. And maybe there's some cleanup that I have to do, because it doesn't really shade nicely. I'm just gonna focus on this guy so you can see what I'm doing. I'm gonna delete this face here, the bottom one. I'm gonna select this edge loop. I'm gonna press F3 to go to my search tab, and I'm gonna type grid fill. This will fill basically the edge with faces. Gonna do the same up here, so I have perfect shading. And as you see, it doesn't distort that crazy like before. We have good shading, and I want these smooth, this smooth shading here on the bevel, because I'm gonna bake these into the low poly. And I want to make this a little bit sharper, because it's super loose now. I don't like this, so I'm gonna press Shift E to add a crease. And I can move my mouse and select how much I want to crease this. And I made a crease. Cool. I'm gonna bring back the rest of the mesh. And I can do this for all the parts of the mesh that I want. So let's see. I want to make a copy of this guy. And by the way, while I'm copying, I'll probably give them names. So this is going to be base_high, because I want this to be the high poly. And I'm gonna make some tweaks to it. I want to add these little grooves we have. So let's add in 1, let's add in 2, and I just noticed something. You know what? Let's get rid of this. Let's add 1 edge loop here. Alt click here and let's can we size this up? Oh yeah, let's bring this out a little bit just so we have a nicer shape going on. There you go. Now I'm happy. Now we can make a copy of it, call this base height. And we can add some details to our high poly. Gonna add 2 edge loops. Oh, and by the way, if you select an edge loop and you double tap G, you can slide it. Very handy. You can do this with everything, with vertices, with edges. I'm gonna select both of them with Shift Alt click, and I'm gonna bevel them with Control B. 1 segment bevel. I'm gonna press E to extrude them, and I'm gonna press S, Shift Z to make them go in. Now they're vanishing because they're intersecting the low poly one. Now you can see it. Okay, now I want to select my high poly models. This, I'm going to call this, let's make a copy of it, call this support underscore high. And I'm going to hide it. And this is going to be support underscore low. Very important to do this for our next step if you're using the software that I'm going to show you, which is going to be Substance 3D Painter. And this is our high poly. Let's change this to top underscore high. Let's hide it and top underscore low. It's case sensitive, okay? So keep that in mind. We have to match it exactly. The icospheres. Yeah, let's shade them nicely too. Let's make a high poly of them. So make a copy with Shift D, and then I'm gonna press Control 1. And let's see. Let's press F2. Call this stands underscore high and stands underscore low. Cool. I'm gonna select all my, what's this cube by the way? Oh, it's the base. So let's call this base underscore low. Just preparing it. Base high. Okay, we got this. Let's hide the high poly by clicking the little eye icon. Yeah, I think they're all gone, right? What is this? Slow. Yeah, they're all hidden. Gonna select all my low polys. Gonna make a new collection by pressing M. This is gonna be called table underscore low, just so I can easily see this. Now it shows up in here. And I can do the same for the other ones. Let's bring them in and... Is this right? Wait, who are you? Why are you showing up? I don't understand. Oh yeah, let's bring this. Let's hide this. There we go. Now we have the high poly. M to make a collection. Table underscore high. Okay, let's hide this and let's work with this, because for us to apply textures, and I'm gonna just get rid of this because it's getting a little bit in the way and I don't need the references anymore. We have to unwrap this. So what do I mean when I say unwrap? Well, if you've ever done papercraft or origami, when you have a sheet of paper with the shapes they're gonna cut and assemble in 3D, that's exactly what this is. So we need a way to insert some strategically placed cuts that from now on we're gonna call seams into the model. So when we put it into a plane and unfold it into our plane UV space, it unfolds correctly, doesn't stretch, doesn't distort too much, and most importantly, is packed into this sheet, this UV space that we can apply textures to. Very important, very important. So let's get a new window here, a new viewport. To do that, move your mouse to the border of your current viewport until it turns into a crosshair. click and drag, and you can add a new viewport. Let's change this to UV editor, and we're gonna do some quick UV mapping for this. All right. Most of these are very simple to make. There are many ways you can approach this, but let's just get to it. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I'm going to add one at the bottom here. And I'm going to add one at the top. It's good to keep in mind, you want to conceal them. You don't want them to be super exposed if they don't have to be, for several reasons. For it to make your texture work more easier, sorry. Make texturing easier, to make the some of the effects in Skyrim, for instance, like the enchanted glow, the shaders that they use will be based on your seams sometimes, and that can cause some very ugly results. So try to conceal them. And let's add one connecting both of them. There we go. By the way, I'm adding it here because it has a sharper transition, and that's why I'm not adding it here, for instance. That's super wide in the open, so I want to conceal it as best as I can. I'm going to press Ctrl E, and I'm going to mark seam. Now, if I select everything and press U and unwrap, you will see our model is unwrapped in here. Let's move it out of the way, and let's keep going, because we still have a lot ahead of us. And I know some people really hate this part, but trust me, you don't want to automate this process, because usually it doesn't yield very good results, at least by the time of this recording. You might feel like you're progressing really fast, but really you're just stealing away time from your future self, who's going to have to learn this anyway. Now, for this Ico UV sphere, Blender will generate some... I know I just told you not to automate the process, but these are so small that I really can't be bothered. I'm just going to leave them as they are. Select all of them, because you have to remember, these are kind of stacked. If I select, click this button here, UV sync selection, you will see you have a lot of them. They're just stacked. I'm going to select all of them. And move them out of the way, make them smaller. Things to keep in mind. We want to use as much space as we can when we are packing these. So if you can make stuff become a rectangle, you should. Probably. You want stuff to be really nicely packed. You don't want to waste space, or you're going to waste resolution. And you want stuff to be in a similar size. Like this, for instance, this is... we're going to call this a UV island. You don't want the islands to be to have super different sizes. Otherwise, you're going to have a very different resolution for each and every one of them. But we also need detail where detail is needed the most. And for this table, the top of this table is the hero of the scene. We want this to have the highest resolution it possibly could, because this is what the player is going to be seeing most, and probably this as well. These are very low priority in our life, but yeah, they still matter a bit. So for this little cylindrical shape, for this vase, if this had faces on the bottom here, I would get rid of them because we don't see them, and that's very important. If you don't see it, get rid of it, just delete it. And I would add a seam to it if I had to, but since there are no faces, I can just put one vertical seam, top to bottom, Control E, mark seam, unwrap. There we go. We're still going to fix these, by the way, so don't worry too much about them right now. We're going to come back to them in a bit. We just unwrap these three. Let's unwrap the top. And for the top, I'm going to add a seam right here. I'll probably add a seam here at the bottom. And let's see. You know what? Yeah, let's add one seam connecting these two. And let's see what we get. Let's mark seam. Let's unwrap it. And we get this strip, which is this entire thing here, I can just hover over it and press L to select the entire island. And since we have sync selection on, it's going to select the mesh here on the 3D viewport as well. And yeah, that's it. And we have this bottom part, which I don't care much about since it's going to be hidden for the most part. And then we have this part here. And I could maybe unwrap it and put a seam here as well and connect this, but I'm just not going to for the time being. As I said, many ways to approach the problem. Now we have our mesh, our model, UV unwrapped. Now we just have to pack it. You can pack this using add-ons, but I'm just going to do some manual packing here very quickly so we can get this into our texturing program. But this is like the most tiresome part, really. After this, things are going to flow much smoother. I'm going to use a free add-on here, and this doesn't come with Blender, but it's super free. It's called Text Tools, and I'm going to use this to rectify my islands. So it's curved, I press rectify, and it's now straightened. So I can place this. And by the way, the controls for the UV screen are just the same as the ones for the 3D viewport. Blender just uses the same shortcuts. So many shortcuts, but once you get them, you really get them. And let's see, let's select this guy. I'm gonna turn him in this direction. Let's straighten him. I have to disable the sync selection for it to work, and then I can just put it somewhere. I can put him right here. Let's see, can I scale this a little bit, make the most out of it? Now, you don't want this to go out of the UV space, and you don't want this to get super close to the other islands as well, since you need some padding for the texture so they don't overlap. Now, this is the hero of the scene. I want to have it super big here at the top if I can. This guy, not really that much. Doesn't have the same importance, so I can make it a tad smaller if I have to. Let's see. These two are somewhat important. Let's see where I can place these. And the top one is a little bit more important than the other one, so I want to make it bigger, since the other one's mostly hidden. So I can even reduce this in size. I'm going to change their positions, going to swap them. Put this guy here. It's like Tetris. It really is. Let's see. Now we have the support, and here's the thing: we can make this straight if we want to. That would probably be a very good call. It might distort, but we're gonna have a much more optimized use of the space, and I might have to reorder things. This might be too big. Let's see, what can I do? Can probably squash it a little bit. Can I do it? It's sort of a puzzle that we have to solve. Can maybe put this guy here. And let's try to straighten this. And I say try because, yeah, we got one strip. We got most of the shape down, and then we got this other strip here, which we probably won't be able to straighten using the add-on because it has some triangles mixed in. But that's completely fine. For our purposes today, this is more than enough. Now I can pack this more effectively since it's It's a rectangle. It's gonna fit in nicely. Can probably give this guy some more headroom. And we're aiming for around 70% of this total area being occupied. That would be the end goal. 70, 80, as much as we can really, but 70, 80, that's a good number. Let's see, can we put this here? This really doesn't really matter. It's super small. Let's put it there. Now I can make this guy a little bigger. I promise you, we're almost done. After this comes the fun part. There we go. And now we have this rogue strip here, which we can just put somewhere. I'm trying not to leave stuff diagonally placed, like everything is either horizontal or vertical. This guy's curved. Can I maybe put it here? That could be maybe something. Yeah, that works. That works even nicer. There we go. So we have our UVs packed. They're ready to go. Before we go to the next step though, let's convert our meshes into triangles. That's very important. Oh, you know what's important as well? We have to save. Oh, we haven't saved a single time. Can you imagine that? Press Control S to save your mesh, and you can just I can't believe I didn't save this. AU table. Test. Not test. AU table. AU table. Let's go. Oopsie. The reason I want to triangulate this is, well, for games, things are going to get triangulated no matter what. So we have to do this ourselves because we don't know which method the game is going to use or which method our texturing program is going to use. And there might be some inconsistencies, and we don't want that. So we're going to triangulate it ourselves. Just add a triangulate modifier. For this multi-res, I don't really need the multi-res anymore. I just don't, because this is a low poly. So I'm gonna get rid of it. Let's add a triangulate. Where is it? I am blind. Triangulate. Same for this guy. Triangulate. Triangulate. Let's take a look. They're all triangulated. And ready to go. So, we're not gonna join them just yet, okay? For texturing, we want to keep them separated because of the because of baking. We're not gonna bake the details from the high poly into the low poly. So I'm gonna select everything, and I will click File. I will export as an FBX. Selected objects, and on my appropriate place here, I'm gonna call this AU table _ low. That's it. Export FBX, and now I can hide this, and I can bring in the high poly, and you'll notice I did not UV unwrap the high poly because I don't have to. I really don't. It doesn't need to be UV unwrapped at all. I'm gonna export this as UV table high. And we're on to the second part of this whole thing. Now, I know this took a lot of time. This took quite a lot to make, but it should get faster as we go. Texturing is by its very nature volatile, and just kidding. Texturing can take you minutes, hours, days, weeks. We're going to make a simple texture using Adobe Substance 3D Painter. I'm not sponsored, I swear. For baking and texturing, if you're not going to use a software like this, you can use XNormal, which is free, and you can texture this in Quixel Mixer by Epic. It's totally free. You can also do it in Blender if you want. The texturing, it's just gonna, beg your pardon, it's just gonna use nodes instead of layers, and I'll explain about that in a little bit. Let's add a new project on a 2K resolution. DirectX, no auto UV and wrap, PBR metallic roughness, select, or low poly. There we go. Controls for substance, Alt. In mouse click, left mouse click, you're gonna rotate around your object. Shift. Ooh, let me drink some water here. Much better. If you hold Shift and middle mouse button, you can pan around. I kind of changed it because I can't stand pressing the middle mouse button. I'm sorry. You can change it, hopefully. Very useful. And your substance, if you're using substance, your layout is a bit different. Your properties are probably down here, but I changed them so I can get a better view of my layer stack. And let's bake. So let's go to the texture set list, change this from default material to AU table. And let's go to our texture settings here. We can bake our mesh maps. Output size is going to be 2K, and I'm going to select our high poly in here. Let's bring that table. Now in X normal, if you go to the 3D viewport after loading your models, your low poly and high poly, you will see something similar to this. We have a cage here, like this creamy color here is a cage, and we want this cage to get above, to get around our meshes, but as little as it can. We don't want it to be super exaggerated like this, and we don't want these red areas here where it doesn't really go over the mesh, or that will give us something that we call artifacts. And these artifacts are not nice to obtain, okay? These are very, very bad. So let's try some stuff here. I'm going to press Alt and click, so I just bake my normal map, and the reason I'm going to do this is because I'm not really sure what's going to happen. So I'm just testing things out. Here, very important, match by mesh name. So we're going to use those Blender naming conventions that we used, and you can change these if you want, but I'm just going to bake. Let's see what happens. Let's return to paint mode, and you can see we have our nice details from the high poly, like this sculpt here that we did, the sculpted details into the low poly. We also have the nice bevel from the subdivision modifier of the high poly on that one segment bevel that we added. Okay, yeah, I'm somewhat happy with this, to be honest. We also have those little grooves. I don't know if you noticed, but these grooves here, they're not present on the low poly at all. They're just baked in. There's no geometry here whatsoever. And I might adjust a few things. Might adjust just a few things. And I'm going to add some super sampling. I'm going to bake all of these guys, except these last three, because I don't really use them a lot. And let's bake. Yeah, this is gonna take it's gonna take its time. Now we just wait. We're not gonna go too crazy on the textures here for the sake of time. I don't want to keep this lecture ultra long. We do have a lot to cover though, so I'm just gonna give you some things to keep in mind. The methods that I'm gonna show you here and things to keep in mind aren't really exclusive to Substance by any means. You can apply this to your Blender textures, to your Mari textures, to your to any texturing program you're gonna use, mostly. And they might have different methods of achieving this, but they all are capable of doing this. Quixel Mixer as well. And I know this is called Substance Painter, but really, they should change the name to Substance 3D Masker, because what we're going to do, instead of hand painting the textures, you can do that, totally fine. But what I'm going to show you here is a workflow based on masks and filters. Now, masks are... I'm going to show you what masks are. You're seeing one right here. You see the black? The black means no information. White means yes. This has information. This is going to do something. And any grayscale in between is going to be interpolated between none and yes. So we have a curvature mask being baked. We have a thickness mask. What do these mean? Well, basically, the software analyzed our mesh, and okay, so this is a curve. Let's mark this as a curve. Oh, this is thinner than this. This is super thicker than this. So let's bake that information. It's just getting information about our mesh, and that's gonna be very handy when adding textures, because we can base our textures on this info. We can texture things and say, hey, I want this color to be where it's thicker. I want this color to be where it's curvier. You get what I mean? And that's very powerful, because if we make a material using those principles, we can take those materials anywhere and they will adapt. They're going to be smart because they will read the specific information of each mesh and they will adapt. They're not hard baked to something. And that's very powerful. Okay, it's done. Let's go back to painting mode. We have our bakes, and let's go back to our layers. Now, substance comes with a lot of materials. Let's say, for instance, wood. We have some materials here that we can just drag and drop. And substance also comes with a few smart materials, so I can just get rid of this. And smart materials they do just what I told you. You can drag them in, and they will apply some edge wear to your mesh, because it knows where your curves are. It kind of knows where those details should be. So that's very powerful. Now, one thing we're going to do is we're going to make ours from scratch. And yes, we could take a lot of time doing this, but we're going to keep it simple. We're going to add a fill layer here. I'm going to call this base. And this will be the base color of our mesh. I'm going to make it it's like a darker brown. That's the base. Yeah, and we're just going to build it up from there. I'm going to press Ctrl G to make a group. Yeah, I'm going to call this AU lecture table. There we go. Now, I want to have some color variation here. And Substance has, not only Substance, but these programs, usually they have filters. And Substance surely does. It's called Hue, Saturation, and Lightness filter, which allows us to control just that, the hue, the saturation, and the lightness. And I can make this darker, for instance. But you will notice that I'm changing the entire mesh. It's changing all of it. And I don't want that. I want to change just some very specific parts. So I'm going to add a mask. Right click, add a black mask. And now, if I paint this white, I'm going to tell the filter, hey, I want you to control this area of the mesh, of the texture. That's very, very, very powerful. We're going to use that. So, on this mask here, let's see, we can add a fill inside of it, and we can use a procedural map. From our starter assets, procedurals, we can add, for instance, say, a cloud. Clouds 1, let's use clouds 1. Let's drag it to the grayscale of the fill, and if I change the HSL perceptive, it's going to change just those little parts. If I alt-click the mask, I'm going to see a preview of it. And there's something I want to show you. Let's see if I can find it. There we go. You see, we have our seams here. We can see the seam. That's because it's projecting the texture onto our UV map. And our UV map doesn't really match up. It has those hard seams. So instead, what we want to do is, I want to go to the clouds here. I'm going to change the projection to triplanar. That's going to project the textures onto the mesh itself, and then translate that into the UV. which is going to pretty much fix most of our seams. Very, very powerful. And I want to make a, I'm going to call this darken. And I want to press Control D to make a copy of this. I'm going to call this lighten. And I want to change the mask, because it can't be the same mask. That's kind of clumsy. Let's change it to clouds 2. And let's preview what this mask is doing. Maybe we can change the tiling a bit. All the white places are the places where our mask is going to be doing things to. And we can change the contrast to make it, add some contrast. We can change the balance to make the effect a little more pronounced. And I think I'm kind of happy with this. I'm going to change the lightness to a lighter value this time. And I'm going to add some saturation to it. There we go. Now it's starting to look more and more like wood. I just think this is a bit too shiny. So I'm going to come here to the base. And on roughness, I'm going to make this rougher. So it looks a little bit more like the wood that I'm thinking about. What you can do is, if you go to your filter, and you select rough here, you can also control roughness using it, which is very handy. Very, very handy. Now, I think this is kind of too strong. I might not really do it. And if I want to control just how much roughness it's controlling, I can change the channel to roughness, and I can come in here and just make it less pronounced. There you go. Just keep it simple. Let's go back to base color. Let's see. Just tweaking some things. Yeah, so we have some color variation going on. I can select both of these. I can press Control G to put them in a group. I'm going to call this color variation. And you know what? I'll probably not control the roughness through this. You know what? I'm going to keep it like that. Just going to keep it like that. Color variation, and it kind of got away because this is in normal mode, and if I put this in pass-through, then the filter can get through, and we can see the effect again. Now, I want to add some wooden textures to it, like some grooves and stuff like that. So I'm going to make a new fill layer, and I'm going to put this in a group. I'm going to call this wooden grain. Yeah, just wood grain. And I want to add this fill layer. I'm going to call this height. I'm going to alt-click height, so this just controls height. And I'm going to add a black mask to this folder. And Substance also comes with some nice wood procedurals that we can see. And I think I'm going to use that one. Just going to add a fill layer here. We're going to add a wood hard procedural to it. And let's tweak this. So maybe put this in triplanar. There we go. Adjust the tiling a bit. And let's see. I can adjust the balance if I want to. Now, I don't want this texture to go to the bottom here, so I'm going to add a filter to this. I'm going to right-click, add a filter. And I'm going to add a... Okay, not a filter. Right-click, add a generator. Is it a generator? Yes. Position. Now, we can change where this is going to take action. Just tweak it a little bit. And I want to avoid that bottom part if I can. So I'm just going to tweak this. There are many ways you can approach these things. But yeah, I'm kind of happy with this. Maybe make it harsher, but then oh yeah, there we go. There we go. And I'm gonna set the blending mode to multiply. So only those areas will get affected. But you will notice nothing is happening. Why? Because a mask is only a selection. what are you doing with that selection? Nothing. So I'm going to go to my height and I'm going to punch in the height. I'm going to reduce the height. And now you can see our grooves start appearing. Cool. It's starting to look a little bit more like wood. And I want to add some more details to it. But you know what? On these grooves, I want them to have some different colors. So what am I going to do? I'm going to... Oh my goodness, this is all inside color variation. I just noticed. Let's move it out of color variation. And let's copy the color variation folder we did, and let's put it in here. So now, if I come in here and I get rid of the roughness, because I don't need it for this part, and I change this to pass through, I can control the color of these grooves. So I can tweak these, and I can add just a little bit of, you know, a little bit more flavor to these parts. Make it darker, just on the grooves. Here I'm gonna make it even lighter. Why not? Just to add that breakdown, those tertiary details in. And we can tweak things as we go. Yeah, I'm kind of happy with that. Okay, we got some wood grain going on. So let's add some breakdown, shall we? Let's add some fibers. I'm gonna add a fill layer in here. I'm gonna call this not breakdown, but wood breakup. Yes, that's the word, breakup. I'm gonna have this control color and height, and I'm gonna add a black mask to this. Let's go look for a procedural. I'm gonna use something that's very straight, like anisotropy, anisotropic noise. So let's add a fill layer to this so we can accommodate our anisotropic noise. And yeah, it's kind of too big. It's kind of too big. Let's adjust this. Let's change this to triplanar. Maybe change the rotation. Let's change the rotation a bit, maybe 90. There we go. And let's change the tiling. We can uncouple this and change the tiling on a certain axis if I want to. There we go. Kind of like this. But it's super linear, and I don't like linearity. It's kind of artificial. So I'm going to add a filter here, and I can change this. And I'm going to add a warp filter. Now it's kind of super strong right now, but we can tweak this by changing the intensity divider and just changing the intensity a bit. There we go. Now we can get rid of the color maybe, or even we can even put like a darker color if you want. We can change it to maybe multiply on the color, and we can punch this value in. So we get those nice wooden lines. You can maybe change this to soft light. You can play around with the blending mode, see what you like best. There's a lot of freedom here that you can take. You can do lots of things. It's very powerful and it's very modular. And the thing about using filters is, if I change my base color, the effect is adjusted. So it's basing it on my base color, and I can just change it on the go. Now, I'm going to add another one of these, wood breakup 2. Maybe I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. I'm going to change this to screen. And once you get to use them, you'll get familiar with what they do. So it's a little, way less trial and error, but there's no harm in experimenting with it. And I'm going to change the the texture here that we're using for the procedural. Maybe add some directional noise instead, just to give it a little something different. I'm gonna change the tiling, perhaps. And let's see. Just adding, maybe make it a little bit green on the color. Who knows? A little greenish wood. Can play around, see what we like. Yeah, like a greenish hue. Maybe add some height variation and maybe make it a little rougher. Nice. Now, if I think this is too hard for some reason, I can change this to a height to the height channel, and I can control the intensity of the height changes, so it's not too overwhelming. Easier on the eye. But anyway, I'm kind of happy with this. Now, let's put some personal AU stuff on this, shall we? I'm gonna make a little fill layer and call this AU logo. And this is where the fun starts. I'm gonna keep this to a height, and I've prepared a little something here. I have a little stencil that I made with the AU logo on it. If only I can find it. Let's see. AU? Anybody home? Is it here? Well, if it's not, that's perfect. That adds us a perfect opportunity to make it happen. Oh, there you go. It's here. So this is a grayscale image. You can make this in any free software that you want. And I use Photopia, which is a free version of Photoshop, to make mine. It's simply a black and white image. And I'm going to make a black mask. Probably keep it out of my material folder, because this is very specific to this table. I'm going to press 3 to go into stencil mode. I'm going to drag my AU label here to the grayscale, and I can change the size of this to accommodate for which size I want the table to be, the logo to be. Now I can just paint it, and nothing happens. Why? Because it's just a mask. It doesn't do anything. So let's turn on some color so we can see what we're doing. Let's make our brush size bigger. And don't worry, I know it looks kind of silly, but we're gonna fix this. Maybe make a base color a little, a darker shade of brown. I can't see very well. Let's add some height in. And now we have our little AU symbol here. And this is all in the textures. I know it looks like it has some height differences, but this is just on the texture. No geometry, which is really nice. Although nothing stops you from sculpting this. And this looks too perfect. Like someone with a CNC machine came in and did this, and I want a more gritty look, so I'm gonna add a filter, and perhaps I can add a blur slope, which Ash from the previous Substance Designer lecture talked about. A very powerful little filter. Very powerful. We can get a more organic looking shape, and if you want to see what we're doing, we can just preview the mask. So we can do this, and perhaps, let's experiment a little bit. Add a filter, add a warp. Let's play around with the intensity. And I kinda like this. I kinda like it. Want to make it more subtle, we can maybe get rid of the blur, the slope blur. Maybe bring it back in, maybe put it on top, reduce the intensity a bit. There we go. Oh, it's looking more and more like what I wanted it to. Well, for Skyrim, though, we should probably get our ambient occlusion in. And a really simple way to do this is add a little fill layer, call it AO for ambient occlusion, and we bake this map. It has some light information on it. I'm going to add a black mask, add a fill, and in here, we should have ambient occlusion. This is something that we baked. You can change this to color only, make it a blackish color, perhaps. And we can maybe make it rougher because it's ambient occlusion. It's being on the obscure faces of the mesh. I will probably have to invert this, and I can just right-click, invert mask. Now we're only affecting these really obscure areas here, and if we want to, we can change the levels. It makes a little levels filter here for us automatically. We could just tweak it and change it. Cool. Put this maybe on multiply. And it's like too perfect. So to the finishing touches here, we're going to add some damage. Because Skyrim textures really love to be damaged and rough. They just look better. Let's try not to overdo it, but for a table like this on this low magic setting, makes total sense. I'm going to make a little folder here called edge damage. I'm going to call this base. Make a black mask. You know what? We don't really need to make a black mask ourselves. We can use a smart mask. And let's type in edge and see what we have in store for us. These are all default. Let's see. Edge dusty, scratched. You know what? Let's use edge dusty. Can we just drag and drop it in here? We can. Now we have a smart mask for us. What are we going to do with it? We're going to change the height a little bit. Add a lot of roughness, because these areas are super dull from all the impacts and stuff. And we can change the color of it if we want to. Just the base. Now this is looking kind of boring. So what I can do is I can, you guessed it, copy the color variation node we made earlier, put it in here, and just change the tiling. We can just change the tiling so it works better. Since this is a super smaller area, we can just come in here, tweak the tiling, make it smaller. Let's preview the mask, see what it's doing. There we go. And now, on our little edge area here, the edge damage, we have some color variation applied to our base. I'm going to change this to pass through, maybe change the base to, well, I don't know. Could maybe change this to screen. Let's see what it does. Doesn't do much. Yeah, let's leave it at that. Kind of happy with it. And we're going to do some finishing touches here. This is a tip from the one and only Professor Dr. Toby Uwu, and it's going to use micro details and anchor points. This is just a finishing touch. I'm going to add a little fill layer here, and I'm going to make a folder. I'm going to call this effects. This needs to be on pass-through for all channels. So just right-click, apply to all channels, boom. Done. This can't have anything. I'm going to change this to pass through as well. Apply to channels. And I'm going to add a filter here called sharpen. And what this does is it allows us to tweak our textures, give it that little edge, you know, just that little crispiness. But that's not all. Let's come in here, let's add a fill layer. And I'm gonna call this height pass. I want this to be disabled everywhere except on height and normal. So I'm gonna just disable it, apply to all channels, go to my height map, height channel, and let's put this on pass through, and the normal one pass through, and that's it. So right click it, add anchor point. An anchor point is something we want to reference later on. This is capturing all those little details on the texture and it's storing it on this anchor point, which we can now use to make a curvature pass, let's say. And I want to put this on screen. I want to have it control color and roughness. Maybe make it a little rough. Add a black mask. And I'm going to add a generator for curvature. Now, this curvature generator is going to use micro details. Which micro details? Well, or the ones in our little anchor point. Change the reference channel for the normal to normal. Change the referenced channel on height to height. And now we have this. We can change this to any value we want, and now we're capturing all those little micro details. We can change the intensity. We can change, maybe put this in soft light. Ooh, soft light is a bit too much, isn't it? Let's put this on screen. Maybe tone it down, just to give us that little something there. And we can tweak this if you want to. We can come in here. We can change the global contrast if you want. We can even warp it if you want to. But I'm just going to leave it as is for the time being, so this doesn't become a Lord of the Rings lecture. And, well, maybe make it a lighter color. That would make sense, wouldn't it? And we can do something here. You know what? Let's add a little fill layer. I'm gonna put any kind of procedure in here, really, and you will see why. Is that a grunge? Let's put it in here, but I'm gonna change this to multiply. So now we can control which areas the effect takes place, and I can maybe play with the tiling. If I make it bigger, I get rid of it more and more. I can maybe change the balance. There we go. Now we have some variation going on. And for the final one, and we're going to call this a day, I'm going to call this AO pass. I'm going to change this to multiply, make it black, and this will use the same idea we applied. Let's add a generator to this, an ambient occlusion generator, all modular, all using masks that we baked. This applies to any sort of material, any sort of mesh. Let's use micro details. Select our height anchor point here, and select normal for the normal, height for the height. There we go. And now we can just tweak this a little bit, and just to give it that little edge. Adds a little breakdown, adds a little something. We can tweak this, tweak the balance. There we go. Get a more pronounced effect. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, that's it. I'm gonna stop here because this is getting way out of control already. And we're gonna put this into the game so we can have our very own prop in there. How about that? Now, before we leave, let me show you this little material we made. We can right click it and we can create a smart material. We can call this, well, as you can see, we can call this everything. We can rename it, and it's a smart material which we can use later. We can build our own library of materials which we can reuse. Isn't that cool? And we know everything that's in here because we made it. Cool. Let's save our project for the very first time because we're living on the edge, aren't we? AU table lecture. No, not yet. Lecture final, because this is the final one. Just save the file, and now we're gonna export it. How? Export textures. We have a lot of templates. Let's go very quickly through our Skyrim preset. $sign texture set. So it uses the name of our texture set. In this case, it's going to be AU table probably. _D for the diffuse. This is an RGB channel. We're going to use our base color. Now, in our case, we baked our ambient occlusion and our curvature in here already. So that's why we can do this. If you don't, then you will have to manually do it. We have an article on how you can do this on the AU wiki. Take a look at that. It's going to hold your hand and take you through the process of making it manually. And on the alpha channel here, we have opacity. You can see this later on. You can pause this is going to be on YouTube, so you can pretty much copy this if you want. The normal map is going to be an RGB channel with our normal DirectX, and the alpha channel is going to have our glossiness, which is the inverse value of your roughness. That's important, okay? Because Skyrim doesn't really work with roughness, it works with glossiness and specularity. Yeah, it's an older game. And we have an environmental mask, which we mainly use for metals and windows. This is going to be our metallic, so just be aware. If you say something is metallic, nothing here is metallic, but if you say something is metallic, it's going to be exported as an environment mask, which we can use to make metals. Metals are their own beast. Hopefully we can have a lecture on them later. And I highly recommend you export this in Targa, so you can use the Cathedral Assets Optimizer, CAO. I'm sorry if I got the name wrong. To convert these to DDS, which is the final format we want for Skyrim. So I'm going to select Targa. That's not Targa. Targa. 8 bits. 2K. Dilation infinite. And let's select where we want to export this. Probably an appropriate place. And let's call this Skyrim. There we go. Export. And it's going to export our textures. Now, one last export. I want to get this into Blender so we can, so I can show you how to set this up in Blender for your own purposes. Maybe you want to render it. Maybe you want to see what it looks like on the model. Ooh, I exported them in Targa. I wanted PNG, but that's fine. It's a Blender principled BSDF. In Blender, hide the high poly, bring in the low poly. Let's expand this bottom timeline. Click here, go to your shader editor, add a new material. This material is going to be called AU table. Okay, now select everything. Make sure this is the active selection. Let's search for link materials. We're going to link materials, so now everything is using this new material. Zoom in on this principled BSDF, and now because we activated Node Wrangler, we can press Control because we want to control something, Shift because this is going to shift our reality, and T for textures. And we can come in here and let's select the, it's going to be a little mini game because this was a messy export. Let's select all the PNG textures here that we exported. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Can I even count? Yeah, that's it. And just okay, and there we go. we have our textures in here. Just like that. If you don't see them, make sure you are not in solid view and you're in material preview mode. And now you can see our textures. How cool. But this is not Skyrim. Let's bring these to Skyrim, shall we? First, let me get these guys. Target textures, I want to copy them. I'm going to make a new folder. AToMM. All right. Now, let's make some folders. Meshes. New folder. Textures. That's it. When we don't need the environment mask, let's just get rid of it. Let's open our favorite photo editor. Let's bring them in. We have our diffuse texture here. I'm gonna, we don't have anything that's transparent. Very important. If you have something transparent, you want this to save as a BC7 probably. What does that mean? Let's export as a DDS and you will see. So DDS, yes, this exports as DDS with no plugins. For Photoshop, you're gonna need a plugin from NVIDIA to do this. Compression, BC1. Because we have a simple diffuse texture, no alpha channel whatsoever. Add mipmaps, please check add mipmaps. And 2K, everything is right. Let's export this, put it in here, and we have our first one. Let's bring the second one. The normal map. File. Export as DDS. We're almost there. We're almost there, I swear. BC7. Why? Because we have our specular our specular map inside here. So we want to preserve that. So BC7, let's save that. There we go. I don't want to save my work. Now we have them in here. DDS. Perfect. Now we need a mesh. How? Easy. Or is it? Let's go to Blender. Okay. Let's slow down a bit. This is important. Our low poly, we're gonna mesh them all together. So I'm gonna press Control J. Join them all together. Cool. This helps performance a bit. You know what? I probably want to make a backup of this because why not? Table, low, back. Always make backups. It takes nothing. There we go. Now we can work safely. Join them together, pressing Control J. And I wanna, these are all triangulated. They have the triangulate modifier with them. And we have to make this as big as that first table that we imported in. So what I'm gonna do is first, center to world origin, cursor to world origin, set origin to 3D cursor. I am going to apply my scale. You see scale, well, it's applied already, really? Okay. Apply all transforms. Cool. I'm going to press S, 100. Control A, apply scale. Very important. Don't forget it. Now, let's apply, let's file export FBX. Selected objects. Well, I do have a Skyrim preset here. You can copy this and add a preset by clicking this button. Selected objects. Scale 1, FBX all. Forward, Y forward, Z up. Geometry. Keep it like this. Armature. Get rid of this. Add leaf bones. For some reason, it's on by default. Just get rid of it, trust me. And we don't have animations, so I'm not going to bake animations. I'm just going to call this AToMM. gonna put it here in Skyrim. Meshes. Export, and hopefully this is gonna work. Let's go back in here. AU table, where's my table? Skyrim, AU table, meshes. There we go. We want to use a little nifty program called CKCMD. I simply get my FBX, I put it on top of fbx2nif.bat, and it's done. Now there's a chance this is not in the correct scale. We will find out together. Huh, it worked like a charm. There we go. We have a nif with our little table. Now, I hate to break the bad news, but this has no collisions. So if you go back to our original nif and you click this button here, you will see it has this red mesh. This is a collision mesh. So this is completely... it's a ghost. You're going to walk right through it. How do we make a collision mesh for this specific static table? Well, simply going to make a very, very low poly version of it. And this, no one's going to see this. This is just how people are going to collide with it. And let's see. Let's keep it simple. Ooh, let's extrude it up. Let's add this little fatty part here. And this one doesn't need to be as big. There we go. This could probably use even less geometry, but I'm just thinking of the random arrow that's gonna stick to this, and people are gonna be like, oh, the collision is terrible. So we're gonna make it a little bit less terrible. There we go. And now the top. Let's add another cube. You know what? We should probably add a cylinder to this one, but a very low cylinder. Very, very low poly cylinder. 8 sides, nothing more. And that's even that seems a bit too much, but it's fine. For our purposes today, everything goes. Okay, there we go. Boom. Now let's join all of these together. I'm going to call this AU table underscore C for collision, just so I can see it better. Now I can hide this low poly. And I can join these all together. Control J. I can apply scale. I can do a cursor to world origin, origin to 3D cursor, and now I can export this. Export FBX AU table underscore C, just so I know what this is. Settings just like they were. Gonna export this. I don't need to UV unwrap this. I just want the mesh. Gonna get this, convert this to a NIF, the same way we just did. Now if we open this up, we should have this very ugly thing. And we have a normal a normal issue. Can we recalculate this inside NIF scope? Yeah, no. Let's just... You want to save? No, let's just fix this in Blender. Yeah, you see, I should have inspected it. But we know how to fix this. Select everything, Shift N, and voila, it's done. C, export, and now it should just work. Copy this collision again, put it here, replace. Let's delete this old NIF, and let's make a new one. There we go, bada bing, bada boom. Now, we're going to use this program here called NIF Utils Suite. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, I apologize. Inside this program, go to Chunk Merge and select target file, we're going to select or the NIF we want to add the collision to. Collision file, we're going to add the NIF we have the collision on. Static template single wood material add collision. There we go. Now if I open this NIF and I click the collision, I have the collision. Cool, now we can start working with this finally. Alrighty, let me see. And let's set this up, shall we? This is, by the way, if you see a neat tree shape here, this means this is an LE NIF. Now, which means it's not SSE. Some people will say you don't need to convert, you don't need to convert. Well, I want to convert things, okay? I have to. So I'm gonna copy this. I'm gonna go into NIF Optimizer, just paste it. I'm gonna open this up, point to the folder I have the mesh in. In this case, it's this one. SSE, optimize. Bam. Simple as that. It's done. I can open it up. Collision's still here. And now instead of neat tree shape, I should see a BS tree shape. Perfect. Let's add some textures to this pink mess. Click the pink mess. Here on the nodes, expand the BS tree shape. BS lighting shader property, expand it. BS shader texture set. Now, here's the thing. This has to be a local path. What do I mean by that? If I come in here and I go to my appropriate place, Skyrim, and I set the AU table textures and I select this, you see, this is Dan's computer. You don't have Dan's computer at home, do you? Hopefully not. So we need this to be just like this. Inside our Skyrim folder with a textures path. How are we going to do that? Well, fastest way to do it is we're gonna get this. If you were using a mod manager, you would do it differently. I'm just gonna throw this inside my Skyrim folder. So I'm just gonna come in here, go to my data folder. We have a textures and meshes folder in here. I can just put them in. Oh goodness, I shouldn't have done that. So inside of here, let's organize this a little better. Let's make a little folder. Not a shortcut, a folder. Let's call this static. Let's call this AU table. There we go. That's how you do it. Same for textures. Let's have the same structure. Put our folders inside of this folder here. And here on the meshes, we're gonna put our NIF file that we made. This one, right? Has to be. Yeah, it has to be. Close this. I don't need this now. Gonna put the NIF with the collision inside of this. And now I can throw these in here. Place. Oof. Don't want to leak. Don't want to leak BS stuff. Okay. And now we can point to it. Hopefully it's there. Let's go. The tree shape, I can come in here. This is the diffuse texture on the first slot. This is the normal map on the second slot. And these other slots serve various different purposes. We have a wiki article for them. Let's just get our path to our diffuse. Is it Skyrim, data, textures, where is it? Static, AU table, select our texture. Same for normal. You know what? Because we have a predictable file path, we can just copy and paste this and change this from a D to an N. We should have our normal map in here. Now we can change some things in. Change the glossiness, make it a little bit rougher, make the specular strength, we can make it super strong. We can make it less strong. There we go. We have our textures in. We have the textures. We have the... Oh, this one doesn't have the collision, does it? I'm such a dork. Wait a minute. Oh, I didn't... Where are my collisions? Are they here? Oh, I'm such an idiot. Okay. Pretend you're not me, and and do the texturing thing on the correct NIF. There we go. Now we can come in here, set our glossiness values, and that's it. We have a NIF. We have a NIF. Or do we? Now, this collision is not going to work because we don't have our BSX flags set up for it. So just come in here, click BSX flags. Double click here on the data number, type 130 or 131. If you are unsure what you should type in here, simple. Study a vanilla BSX flags. See, 130. There we go. Now we can save this as, and let's see, where does this go in? Skyrim, data, meshes, static, AToMM, AToMM, yes. Done. Let's get into the game. Last step, the last one. Creation Kit. Let's open it up. Creation Kit can be downloaded on Steam. You can get it for free. You don't need to have Skyrim to get it, I believe. Please make sure you install the special edition one and make sure you get the CK fixes for SSE with the updates. It's on the Nexus. We have the links in here. Alrighty, so let's go to File, Data, select Skyrim. Let's load up Skyrim. We're going to do two things here. We're going to set up our Creation Kit records. It's the last thing we do, and I'm going to make a new mod, a different mod, so we can test this out without really compromising the original one, which has the records. So let's clone a table. Common table. Let's click on actors, all, common table round. Let's double click it. Let's change the name of this to AU common table round 01. Here in the model, click edit, edit. We're going to select our mesh. So where is it? Where is it? Static, AU table. Boom, there she is. Yeah, that's it. Click OK. You want to make a new form? Yes. Otherwise, you're going to overwrite the old vanilla common table. We don't want that. Create a new form. It's here. That's it. I'm not going to do anything else to this file. I'm just going to save it to a new plugin called AU table. Now, I'm going to close Creation Kit. I'm going to open it up again. I'm going to click File, and I'm going to double click on my table. But I'm not going to make it active. I'm not going to set this as an active file. I'm just going to double click it. Click OK. You do not have a file as active. Yes, I know. This is a test plugin. This is just for us. If you were doing something for Beyond Skyrim, you would send that first one to your lead. It's in the game. It's not changing the world. But I want to see it in game. So interiors, here on the cell view, let's type in unknown cell and double click it. We're inside this unknown cell to test this thing out. Now, if I type in AU table, I should see my table. Okay. AU common table. Okay, there we go. We just click and drag it. There she is. Look at her. Ooh, we can rotate her. We can place her. I don't quite remember how to use Creation Kit. I'm not a level designer. I'm sorry. Level designers out there. Now we can save this plugin. I'm going to call this AU table test. Save it. And now for the moment of truth. All this work. Let's play Skyrim. Mods. load order. Let me see what I have here. I'm going to select my AU table, which is the main mod, and the test mod. Okay, and for us to go to that cell, all we're going to do is we're going to press tilde, type COC unowned cell. It didn't crash. If I dramatically look back, there she is. Let's collide with her. We can collide with her. And there she is. From scratch, we made this in Blender. We textured it, and it's in game now. We can jump on it if we want to. We can do all sorts of things. It's alive. Let's shoot an arrow in it. That's not an arrow. I forgot how to play the game after all these years. It makes a wooden sound, and the arrow sticks in here. Beautiful. Beautiful. Now, one last thing before we go. I'm going to teach you how to pack this properly and make a mod. So, what do we need? If you want to use this in mod manager, mod loader, if you want to send this to people, we need to get our little plugins that we made in Creation Kit. AU table. In this case, AU table just has the record, but you would get the plugin with all your level design done, ideally. Now, what we're gonna do, I'm just gonna get rid of these. I don't need them anymore. Gonna paste the plugin here. Can get rid of these meshes, textures, and a plugin. I'm gonna right click. I'm gonna compress these. AU table zip. That's our mod. If you give this to people and you put this in your mod manager, it's gonna work. It's just gonna work, okay? And that is the end. Oh my goodness, what a monstrous lecture. Guys, thank you so much for sticking by. I hope there was something in for all of us here. Yeah, I'm gonna stick around, open up for questions if you guys want to talk. If you don't, drive safely. Thanks for coming, and I hope this was useful in some way.